Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. On today's edition, it's the famous podcaster, Luke Jennings. I made a joke up about Luke. Ready? What do Luke Jennings and Ian Hunter of Mount Hoople have in common? They both came all the way from Memphis. Get it? What do you mean you don't get it? Ah, what do you punks know? You young ragamuffins? It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Nobody has a sense of humor no more. Welcome, everybody, to the new edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. How is everybody today? My name is Bob Smith. I used to be with Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine, for you veteran fans out there who remember me. Getting into the nitty-gritty of this year, we'll be around in 2 years at the end of December. I want to thank you all for your support. It's been a wonderful ride so far. We got a really cool guest this time. His name is Luke Jennings. He's from, England. And he's going to discuss his Memphis wrestling podcast. What? Who? Yep, there's someone in England who does a regular Southern wrestling podcast. Can you believe that? Pretty amazing, right? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of all this and maybe tell you about a show and some things you don't know about Luke Jennings. So get yourself a nice snack. Get yourself a hot toddy or something, or diet cola, caffeine-free. That's what I drink. I shouldn't even drink that stuff, but I drink it all the time. I'm a man of many vices. Anyway, Joe Walsh, the James Gang, the Eagles, and Joe Walsh. He's coming up next. And we'll get right to our conversation with the one and only Luke Jennings. We will be right back.
This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/What is ham radio? See you on the air.
All right. Now, this is the most different wrestling guest I've had in terms of podcasters than you could ever ask for. This fellow does a Memphis wrestling podcast and a bunch of other wrestling podcasts, and he's not even based in the United States. I want to welcome to the show and introduce to you Mr. Luke Jennings, who has the most interesting podcast network I've ever heard of. Luke, welcome to the show.
Hello, Bob. Thank you very much for having me.
So I'm just going to give you the floor because I want to find out all about you, how you got started, and all the podcasts you're working on. Because you sent me a list when we first started talking, and I was like, holy mackerel, what is all this stuff? So tell me about it.
So I'm British. If you haven't already, if you haven't already heard, I've been podcasting now for about 4 or so years. It was mainly on and off. I had a few podcasts before I did these primary sort of 4 or 5 that I do now. I used to do like a deathmatch podcast, which is okay, but there's only so many times you can get excited about someone getting smashed over the head with a light tube. I enjoy the genre, but there's only so many times you can sort of sit there and go, oh, he's been smashed over the head with a light tube. Oh, he's been like... So that was happened. And then I stopped because work got in the way. And then I restarted up again full time 2 years ago now. My work changed. My wife, she became ill, sort of severely ill, and that sort of put things in priority. And then as soon as I knew she was getting better, I started doing it again. I do a Memphis podcast, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. I also do Hamburg All Stars, where I cover 1978 WWWF All Star Wrestling. I also have a show called Monday Night Project. Originally was 1993 to 1994 Monday Night Raw. I stopped that. I finished King of the Ring 94, and then I started doing WCW Saturday Night I'm doing January to July 1996, because usually when people cover WCW 96, it's all NWO, 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 but there's no real focus on like the other kind of stuff that's happening. So that's that. I'm currently doing In Your House Weekly, where I'm covering the In Your House pay-per-views from the WWF back in the day, the old ones. I finished that in November, and then I'm starting another project. And then I also do a Japanese, we watch sort of classic Japanese wrestling every month. That's called Pure Wrestle Passion. The plan was originally to cover like the television episodes of All Japan Pro Wrestling that were around on YouTube. But I understand no Japanese, so I kind of felt I wouldn't sort of know what was going on. I know they're not very storyline eccentric in Japan, but I'm sure there would be some sort of happenings going on that I would have no understanding of what I'm doing. So I just watched some old sort of Terry Funk stuff, Stan Hansen, all that kind of stuff, and just sort of commentate. I've got a very different style. I don't know if I've got a very different style of podcasters, but I don't watch and then review. Personally, I've got no time to sit there and watch an hour and a half show to then go back for an hour and a half and then talk about that hour and a half show. So I like to just sit there. I watch it as live. I commentate on it, and that's sort of my style of podcasting. I think people like it. I think people listen. I hope people listen. Anyway, but yeah, that's the sort of the nitty gritty of the shows that I cover at the minute. So it's all just I enjoy what I'm doing. So if I don't enjoy it, then I won't watch it, which is what happened in the past with my past podcasts.
I understand that entirely. When I was working, I don't know if you know, I was with magazines called Pro Wrestling Illustrated back in the 80s and 90s. I got tired of it. I was looking at it 10 hours a day. You know, I had to, because we were writing about it in the magazines and whatnot. And too much wrestling is like too much ice cream. You love it at first, but then you get an upset stomach after a while. You know, it goes both ways. You know, you can only have so much pleasure. So anyway, why Memphis? Why you? I mean, coming from overseas like you are, that seems to be your main jam, right? You seem to enjoy Memphis as much as I do. And Memphis happens to be my favorite territory of all time, for sure. Because I discovered it when I started with the magazines and fell in love with it immediately. I loved the studio show, the whole 9 yards, the whole vibe of it. Why Memphis? Why are you into that so much?
From what I can gather, there's not that many podcasts that talk about Memphis. I know Randy Hales, who actually ran Memphis for a time being. He's got a show, and people will do it on the off chance. If they cover a variety of different promotions, they'll dip in and out of Memphis. They'll go, oh, let's watch it when Eddie Gilbert ran over Jerry Lawler with a car. Let's watch it when Coca Beware dropped a man on his head. All that kind of stuff. But I just felt that there was a niche in the market. People will cover world class and mid south sort of all the time, and their podcasts are great, and you can learn stuff. But there's only a certain amount of time that you want to hear about the Von Erichs and all this kind of stuff. So Memphis to me was different. It's brought us a lot of people that are very influential in the business. The Rock, Steve Austin, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett's still wrestling today, for God's sakes. The Undertaker passed through them. You know, you name, the majority of like the WWF in like the mid to late 90s passed through there at some point. And it sort of gets poo-pooed a lot. It gets poo-pooed about the stories of Jerry Jarrett not paying people properly, or Jerry Lawler doing this. And I try and, there's podcasts out there that like to focus on what's happening backstage, be it with the pencil or be it with who said what, who did what to who. But I kind of don't care about that. I like to focus on the in-ring stuff. I like to focus on Jerry Lawler being a wrestler what he does outside of the ring is up to him. But like the Memphis stuff is great. And it's just nice to watch it on a week-to-week basis, and it's different. I'm currently in 1980. I think the episode that came out this past week was November the 3rd, 1984. The look of it is so different to anything else. If you watch WWF from 1984, it's dark. It's coming out of smoke-filled buildings, to quote a man, but it's still just dark and dismal. Whereas Memphis is just bright and light, and Lance and Dave are there being cheery and everything, and you've got you get your Jerry Lawler sort of 3-minute matches where it's punch, 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 fake a sell, punch, punch, but it's all very I don't know what the word is. I can't think the word anyway. But yeah, it's all very different, and it just looks different. Even in I think I've been covering it since 1981, and it's just looked very different, and it doesn't get talked about, like I said, positively. People remember Lance, people remember Dave, but there's also that tangent of people going, Jerry Jarrett did this and all that kind of stuff. And like I said, I don't care about that. I just want to watch the in-ring stuff. And you're watching people go through it at the minute. Rick Rude's there, King Kong Bundy, Randy Savage. We all know what they became, but it's nice to see where they were, their beginnings of the career, which Memphis is very, very good at doing.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm with you. This podcast, I don't give a rat's patootie about what happens backstage. I really don't. Even now, I don't care. I don't care that two people had words backstage or somebody got into a fist fight. I got news. They were getting into fist fights in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. It's part of the scene. It's a lot of aggressive people in one place, and that's what happens. And I don't care about who got paid off or who didn't. And, it's boring to me. I like to keep it in the ring too. So I appreciate the fact that you feel the same way, pretty much.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, even now there's people, grown men getting into tizzies about who said what and who did what. And, it's a bit, probably a lot of people who work in normal jobs have disagreements. You probably work with an annoying person, or, you sit across a desk from someone who just constantly talks rubbish. You just go, I'm getting paid at the end of the day. It's only 8 hours out of my day. Same as, wrestling. I know they're in the ring for an hour-ish, but they're, as soon as they're out of that ring, just go away. Just go and sit in your little locker room or your bus, whatever your company you're working for, and just think, I'm getting paid a ridiculous amount of money, especially in one, I won't name promotions, but in one promotion, you're getting paid a ridiculous amount of money to work 3 days a week, and just get over it. There's no need to just enjoy what you're doing. Try and make a mark on someone's life, try and be the next Jerry Lawler, try and be the next John Cena, and try and make a positive mark on someone's life. People don't, we all suffer, a lot of us suffer from mentalness and all that kind of stuff, and the world is at times a very depressing and horrible place. We need you to be a human being and an adult for one day a week on television. We don't need to go onto Twitter where it's a cesspool. We don't need to say, oh, such and such has done this, or such and such said this about them. And just try and be nice. Try and project yourself, and remember that there are people who work 40, 50, 60-hour days, 60-hour weeks for pittance. And they can be an adult, and they can work with someone who can be a pain in the bottom. So it's all just very
perspectives.
Crazy.
Yeah, you get some perspective out there, folks. Some people will be at loggerheads with someone else, but you don't know what kind of a day that person's had. Maybe you're at a fast food place and they don't serve you fast enough. Well, it could be busy. It's just people fly off the handle. I find these days, especially after the pandemic. I think people fly off the handle over the smallest little things, and it gets to me after a while. It's like, calm down. I mean, life goes on.
Definitely.
Get upset when you have something to really get upset about. That's the way I feel about it, So anyway, Memphis is just hey, by the way, I don't even know if I know a couple of fellows here in the States. One is named Gene Jackson, and there's named John McCall, and they do Memphis podcasts as well. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, I've heard Gene's. I started getting into Gene's USWA a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard him on your show, and then I listened to a lot of the WrestleCopia stuff anyway. John McCall's I haven't listened to yet, but I have heard good things.
Yeah.
But there's...
John was there. That's what I like about John. John was actually part of that scene for decades, and he comes at it. And I appreciate this with a fan's perspective, what it was like to sit in the Coliseum and watch those shows, So I really appreciate the fact that he's so enthusiastic about Memphis after all these years, just like I was. I mean, I got to go on the Memphis TV show once. Most mere mortals can't say they were in Channel 5 with Dave Brown like I was. So it was pretty cool. I just have so many great memories of both watching the show, going to Memphis for a week and enjoying myself there. And I got to know Jerry Lawler quite well. I still consider him a friend to this day. And
nice.
It was cool. I always say about the trip I took to Memphis, I didn't want to come home. There's just something about it. It was different. It was a whole different flavor. I had been backstage at NWA events, a lot of those, because I also worked for WCW magazine later on. So I knew what it was like backstage and what a good vibe was and what a bad vibe was. Memphis always had a good vibe. Even though, some of those guys on TV were getting beat up and making $10 or whatever it was, everybody seemed to want to be there and do their jobs. And that's what I appreciated about Memphis. It's almost, I don't know, like a family business, so to speak, mainly because it was a family business, right?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So in any event, now tell me about the other podcast one more time, because you're so busy that I need to know a little bit more about your other podcast as well.
So every other Monday, so Hamburg All Stars comes out one Monday, and then the following Monday, Monday Night Project comes out. They sort of alternate. Hamburg All Stars is me covering WWWF All Star Wrestling. Mm-hmm. Currently in the fall of 1978. I've a show that I've recorded that won't come out for another month. They're talking about the fallout from Peter Maivia and Bob Backlund. Peter Maivia had just turned the week before on Championship Wrestling, I think, on Bob Backlund. Mm-hmm. And Vince is sort of being very sad about it, and he also brings in Gorilla Monsoon to talk about it. That's got better. There's been a few episodes where I sort of sit there thinking, my God, what have I done? Because, sorry, just my dog wagging his tail. There's a lot of times when you just think, my God, what have I done? Because obviously it's a very different style to what I'm used to watching in the WWF from the 90s. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's good. Vince he's on his own at the minute. I think I'm just about to come into the Bruno era where he's commentating. But Vince there's a lot of silence from Vince. He'll talk about the match for a bit, and then there's just nothing. Mm-hmm. And then he'll talk about something else, and then it's just nothing.
Well, you know what that may be? Those silences you hear? They used to do interstational, what they called cut-ins with sound. You would hear either Vince McMahon or Howard Finkel go, on June 15th at the Java Mosque in Pennsylvania, we're going to have a great car with Ivan Putski. And when you see the replays of the shows, there's just silence. And I think that maybe part of that's the reason for it, particularly if it's at the beginning of a match. Like the bell will ring and, well, let's go with the action. Usually after that is where you hear a long period of silence. That's because back then they would have an advertisement for one of their local shows in audio as you watched the match. So I think that may clear that up for you a little bit.
Yeah, that does make sense, because obviously I'm watching the stuff off the network / Peacock.
Right. He'll say, here we go. This will be a great one. And then you don't hear anything for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's good. Like I said, it's getting better. Sort of having to see the likes of Spiros Arion. I'm sure I've heard good things about him from back in the day, but at the minute he's just a bit it's all sort of punch and kick and all that kind of stuff. But obviously that was the style at the time back in the 70s. Yeah. So that's going okay. And then Monday Night Project, I'm covering, like I said, WCW Saturday Night from January to July 1996. Currently, I'm around March, I think. I get, because my wife works late and I'm at home, I'll just sit and record. So sometimes I don't know where I am. But I know I'm currently around Uncensored 96. So we're doing the build up to the Doomsday Cage match, where it's the alliance to end Hulk Hogan. That's happening. We're also getting Fit Finlay versus Lord Steven Regal, which I think they have a pretty brutal match at Uncensored 96. which I'm looking forward to rewatching. Sting and Lex Luger are the current WCW Tag Team Champions, and there's sort of things happening there. Sting doesn't trust Lex Luger because he's sort of a big smiley guy when he's with Sting, but then when Sting's got his back turned, he's hanging around the Dungeon of Doom and Jimmy Hart and all that kind of stuff. So that's happening. But it's like I said, it's good. We've not yet started the build-up of the Outsiders because they're going to start coming in, I think, in a couple of months. But it's nice to be looking at WCW 96 from a non-NWO sort of eyes, because, like I said, there is still great talent happening. There's great talent going to start coming in. To be fair, I like WCW. People always poo-poo it again about what's happening outside of the ring, but in the ring, there's some pretty good action, especially like 93 to 97.
Mm-hmm.
I've said this numerous times on numerous boards, but promotions to me have like a 3 to 4 year kind of cycle. Like ECW was pretty awesome from like 95 to 98. WWF they've had numerous sort of eras of like 84 to 80 or 85 to 89, and then like 97 to 2002. There's even the territories had, Memphis had its days from like 82 to 86, and then after that you can see by the attendances that it just goes, and then it'll only pick up sometimes if there's a bit like Jimmy Valiant comes back into town, or Austin Idol comes in and out of promotions, and Texas World Class had the same thing. The glory days of World Class are 82 to 86 kind of thing, and WCW has that as well. So I'm looking for, after July 96, I'm probably going to start another promotion again, but doing it every other week is going to take me forever.
Right.
And then the In Your Houses that I'm doing, I think just come out as Canadian Stampede. I think this coming Tuesday is going to be In Your House Ground Zero. I've gone from watching the whole event to covering 2 or 3 matches, because the Ground Zero In Your House changes from a 2 hour to a 3 hour pay-per-view, and some of the matches are a bit tedious. I don't need to be watching Scott Putski versus Brian Christopher. No disrespect to those guys, but I don't need to be sitting through a 3 hour pay-per-view. So I'll look at the card and go, all right, I'll pick out a mid-card match, then I'll usually cover the last 2 matches. But that's going to come to an end in November, and then I start a new project covering a new promotion, which is going to be the Mid-Atlantic promotion.
Wow.
Going to be a podcast called Crossing the Mid-Atlantic, because obviously I'm in Britain and that's happening over there. I've recorded the pilot episode, which should be coming out in a couple of weeks. I covered September the 9th, 1981. I'm basically going off YouTube for stuff like that. But again, another promotion I like. It's bright, it's fun, it's friendly because of Bob Caudle. And again,
Right.
You get to see the rise of your Sergeant Slaughers, your Ricky Steamboats, and all those kind of guys. So I'm looking forward to covering that. And Pure Wrestling Passion every month usually comes out the first week or so of every month. I just watch 2 or 3 matches from Japan. Again, I don't understand a word anyone's saying, but I'll just sort of sit there with the volume down and just commentate on what I'm watching. And again, you see everyone knows about sort of Abby and Brody and Terry and Stan. It's nice they're the names that I know, but I've also from other podcasts you hear of other names that you sort of aren't familiar with, but you get to sometimes see them on a YouTube video, and that's good fun. It's at the minute I'm enjoying what I'm doing, so hopefully everyone who listens enjoys, and I'll just continue to plod along and podcast.
Oh, that's really cool. And I'll tell you what, I'm excited about. You mentioned the Hamburg show. I'm excited about that because 70s WWWF was my jam. That's what I grew up watching.
Mhm.
In 77, I would have been a year out of high school. So it's like, wow, I got to check out those shows for sure, because it's like, that's what anytime I can kind of relive those days, that's a good feeling. And it's a little trivia for me too, because after Vince got big and moved on to bigger arenas, Mario Savoldi's promotion, which at that point was called IWCCW, don't ask, it doesn't matter, but IWCCW started to do TV tapings in that very arena, and I got to go there do some commentary and stand in the very spot that Vince McMahon stood and did interviews with wrestlers, which is like,
Oh, nice.
I could just feel the history of the building, and I'm like, holy smokes, I'm never going to forget this. And I did it several times, maybe 6 or 7 episodes of the show. So it was pretty cool. I always enjoyed going to see what Mario Savoldi had going on. He had a lot of stars that were like in between contracts, so he would bring them in and then develop his own young talent underneath. Taz got to start there. Tommy Dreamer got to start there. A lot of young guys from the East Coast worked their way through either ICW or IWCCW. So
oh, nice.
That way, Mario Savoldi does have a legacy because he helped break stars in the beginning. You know, many people don't realize like Taz was in a tag team called the Tasmaniacs. It was Tasmaniac number 2. People don't even know that, but that was part. That was part of IWCCW. Yeah. So, and Greg Valentine would show up every so often. Tony Atlas was your champion, and so those were good days. And when you mentioned the Hamburg Arena, I know that I worked there, and it just kind of, I think that I stood, and Joe McHugh from those early days was the ring announcer for Savoldi, who probably was the ring announcer on All Star Wrestling when you're watching it, I guess.
Yeah, it's not changed yet, no.
Yeah, I think Capetta is the one on the other show, Championship Wrestling.
Yes, I think so, right.
Yeah. So by that point, and it kind of also, the fact that you're doing that show is, there's a big lie about pro wrestling is that nothing started until 1984 when Vince expanded. I say to you, my friend, pro wrestling was always popular on the East Coast, even on those shows. They used to fill Madison Square Garden and the Boston Garden and other big arenas based on those TV shows that you're reviewing. So anybody who thinks that wrestling wasn't big before 1984 is sadly mistaken.
Yeah, I like to give people a perspective, because I know some people will know, most wrestling fans will probably know WWF or WWWF, whatever, but there is things out there that also happened. And I like to go on the internet and have a look. I sort of do like a rundown of what's happened in the time periods between me doing the shows, which is usually a week, but sometimes with the WWF footage, it's been lost. So sometimes I can go 2 weeks. So I like to give a what's been happening around the rest of the wrestling world, I call it. And I use the sort of the results are Memphis, Omni, Florida, that kind of stuff. And you can see that people are filling arenas. I think on the last Memphis I recorded in 1980, I think it was Thanksgiving 1984, this is obviously the results that are known, but there's over 60,000 people have gone to wrestling on Thanksgiving night, which is like, I know arenas are that big now, but to think that on a holiday that you guys celebrate, where you're probably at home, you've had your dinner, you probably just want to sit down in front of the television, but there is at least 60,000 people around the country have gone, let's just go down to the wrestling and have a good night. Our tickets were probably back in the day dirt cheap, considering what they are now. But it's also fun to see, like you said, there is stuff outside of the WWF, and you can see. Sometimes you'll see the Hamburg arenas, because obviously they did 2 or 3 tapings at once, depending on what week I'm watching. If it's the first taping, then you can kind of just see the bleacher seats in the darkness, and they're full. And then the second taping, they're sort of half full, but you'll see people walking around, because obviously people have gone to get their concessions and all that kind of stuff. There's 2 or 3 gentlemen in the front. If you look at at the hard camera, there's 2 or 3 gentlemen. Yeah. They are the same 3 gentlemen all the time. There's like an old man with a hat.
Right. And the heavy set guy next to a really big guy, right? Right.
Yeah, there's like a couple, I think they must be father and son, because they look kind of familiar. And they are there every week. I think they've been there. I've been covering it since 77 on and off. But then you'll see like Blassie's doing an interview at ringside, and he's like just ripping the what out of them, going, "You're fat, you stink," blah blah blah. But like every week, I don't know how long they stay there for, but they are there every week, and that's great to see. And I think there's infamous stories in Memphis of there's an elderly lady who used to be on the front row, and you'll hit sometimes when they show the Memphis Coliseum footage on the television shows, you'll hear her. There's just this shrill, just like get him, get him, get him. And like she is there, like it's great to see people that go every week.
Yes.
we have there's a wrestling promotion in this country, and they sort of half the front row is filled with people, the same people, every time you go to these shows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to see that people have an invested interest in it, and because I'm sure they weren't sitting there going, "Oh, we're just going to sit here because we're going to be on television," like they would do now, because they'd be sat there with a stupid T-shirt or a sign, just trying to, get a bit of social media fame or whatever. These guys are purely there because I would imagine they like their wrestling, and I would imagine that they would probably go. I don't know how far Hamburg and Madison Square Garden is travel-wise, but I'd imagine they'd probably go there as well, and that's great to see.
I don't know about that, 'cause the Garden was quite a haul from Pennsylvania. It really was. Yeah, I'd say it's 3 hours.
Oh, right, crikey.
Yeah. But I will say this: you're absolutely right about those fans. They used to call those old ladies hat pin Marys back in the 50s and 60s. They would literally take out a hat pin, stab the bad guy wrestlers as they came down the aisles in the early days of televised wrestling, when people got really upset at the bad guys for real.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of nostalgic about those days, because I used to go to wrestling when I was a kid, and it was, in an armory, and there'd be the old ladies sitting in front of me screaming, "Hair, hair," because the guy was pulling hair. It was like, I just love that era. You know why? Because that was my jam. That's where I grew up. That's where I discovered it all, was the serious. I hate to use the word kayfabe, but people believed back then. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hence why people are getting, Roddy Piper's getting, ripped apart nearly, and people are getting stabbed when they're walking. It was, to a horrible cliche, but it was real. Damn it,
it was.
People, you got there. I think there was a story on one of the, I think it was Tales of the Territories about Memphis, where the Iron Sheik came to Memphis for a very short time period, and there was people ringing. They were sort of, ready to lock and load and go to the TV studios and shoot the Sheik, because he was at full blast doing Iran #1 USA Hatu.
Yeah, right.
And that was that was sort of in the early 80s. It was still real to people, I think. Well, to sort of the mid 90s, I guess, where the internet sort of destroyed everything. And but there's still fans that would regularly go in the 90s, because you've got Vladimir, and you've got
I was about to
guys.
mention, yes, I knew those guys very well. Wouldn't say very well, but I used to talk to them at any non-MSG card I had access to ringside when I was covering for the magazines, and they would always be in the same spot. I don't know how they got the tickets. 5 to 10 of these guys would all gather, Vladimir right in the center, and they were the nicest guys, and they lived for this stuff, man. I mean, and I got to give them credit. Even in their old age, if you saw the Vladimir documentary, they're still into it. It's still a big deal to them. Yeah. You know what? Any business needs customers like those, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely, yeah.
The most loyal one.
You need your loyal customers that will come no matter what. It doesn't matter if it's raining, snowing, if, business is down, business is up. They're there each and every week, whatever month, whatever it is. They've paid their X amount of dollars, and they're sitting there, and it helps when they're on a camera, because they're going, absolutely mental, and it shows that people are still enjoying it, or were still enjoying it, whatever the case may be. But it wasn't one of those gentlemen, Mike Johnson, who was into the magazines and everything?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, which leads us all to the question I ask all people who are into nostalgia like I am. How do you feel about today's stuff? And don't hold back, because I don't.
I don't watch it. It's on, we have to pay for it over here. I'm sure some of you TV channels and everything, but it used to be on Sky Sports up until 10 or so years ago, then went over to, it was BT Sports, but it's recently become TNT Sports, because it's been brought over by the Discovery conglomerate. So I don't watch it, but I'm fully aware of what's happening. I sort of look at the results every Tuesday morning to see what happened on Raw. I look at YouTube clips of WWE. AEW, I actually went to All In last year in Wembley. It was okay. We thought it was going to be a one-off, but then as we're leaving the door, they're going, "We're going to be back next year." And from what I can gather, they sold less tickets this year, but they put the ticket prices up. So where would I sat sort of mid mid-stadium kind of thing, and I paid just under £200 for that. And I think it went up by quite a considerable amount this year. But from what I've heard from people on other podcasts, they got what they wanted last year, where they got the attendance record thing, and then they decided to just lower hike tickets, but lower the seating allocation. So they've I think they've made probably the same amount of money. But AEW is just, it's just unbearable. I think I don't watch it again, but I again follow it. I know what's happening. I used to watch it religiously because I used to listen to Jim Cornette just constantly slag it off. And it became to the point of I was getting I was just like, why am I watching this? Like, I love Cornette a bit, but like, I think, there's obviously something happening where he's watching it for his own, why he's watching it for his own health, I do not know. But it's just, he's just chitting over all the time. And I got to the point of, what? I'm watching this just to, kind of enjoy another man's content because I'm, enjoying his podcast. And it's just, they go 2 or 3 weeks promoting somebody, and then they'll go and grab someone else from another promotion, and then they'll put him on the limelight for 2 or 3 weeks. And then they'll go and grab someone else from another promotion and put him in the limelight for 2 or 3 weeks. And then the first guy that they were promoting is wrestling on YouTube or something. It's just like, they had an explosion of talent, and that didn't help, I don't think. I think it helped garner eyes to their promotion, but then after a while, people were going, why? Why are we watching this? Like Miro, as Rusev in the WWE, he was great.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to AEW, and it's just like, he's just like the shadow of a man.
The problem with AEW is that, to an extent, they have brought in the beginning a lot of young talent that was born in the indies, right? The independent local from around the country. They were allowed to come on national television with the same guises and characters they had in front of 75 people in a high school gym. That doesn't work. No. Wrestlers need honing. They need massaging. They need to be sculpted into a personality and with a name that makes sense. And, they had things like Chris Stadler coming in. She was a space alien in the beginning, like she was in the indies around here in Long Island. And I'm like, no, it didn't work. So finally they made her herself, and now she's a bigger star. But the problem is that wrestlers can't book themselves. And I think that by and large is what goes on in AEW. Yeah, I honestly think Tony Khan listens to what his wrestlers have to say, and he goes, oh, that's great, go ahead. And I think that's as far as it gets. I really mean it.
Yeah. It's very sort of mid or early 2000s WCW, where the inmates are running the asylum.
Right.
Just because, like you say, just because someone like the Young Bucks are filling out Reseda, California, doing, super kick after super kick, that's not necessarily the target audience for Oklahoma on a Wednesday night or somewhere like that, because they've built up that fan base in Reseda, and they're not going to be able to follow them each and every week to watch them wrestle, where they can cheer on the good guys. And and you look at WWE, they've brought in big names, and they were stuck in NXT for a while. Shinsuke Nakamura from Japan, he had his own style, he had his own charisma. He's put into NXT for a little while. He's been then put back in the WWE, and he's not the Shinsuke Nakamura from New Japan. And I think even AJ had to go into NXT for a little bit just to sort of get that independentness off him, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
AEW is very sort of like, oh, you'll come in and you'll do this, and then we'll continue to book you like this. But the minute you don't like that, then, we're just going to have an argument and you can go away. And it's not good. The television side of it is okay. I think WWE is still a mile, gazillion miles above them,
and getting better, at least production wise by the week. It's unbelievable how professional it is.
You can even tell that from a 2-minute YouTube channel that it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's only going to get better probably with this Netflix deal that they've got. And you can definitely tell that Netflix is getting wrestling ready with the documentaries they've got coming up. I think they've got at least 2 coming up this month.
Right.
And you can definitely tell that they're starting to get wrestling ready, because I don't think they're going to up their prices. I don't think they are here. I don't know about in America. But with the network coming across, there's going to be a big swarm of people come over to Netflix, and I'm definitely looking forward to. I'm definitely looking forward to being able to watch sort of the old school stuff again on the Netflix.
Well, I'm imagining the only ads on the show will be from their own, merchandise and stuff like that. If there's no advertising on Netflix, as far as I know, so it'll be a wrestling show without ads. Really, I can't even imagine that.
That's going to be tough on the guys.
Secondly, it kind of opens up language barriers and other things that they may never be able to present on a regular broadcast television that they can do on pay streaming service.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if there's a market change once they switch over. I'm really excited about that one. I think that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's going to be nice to be able to, like I say, watch it over here again. And there'll be I think we have Raws live on TNT or whatever, but it'll be good. If you're up in the morning for some reason, you can just stick Netflix on. Plus, it's also going to be, if you've got a mobile phone, most people have Netflix on their mobile phones, so it's not just going to be sat in the in your front room watching it. You can watch it on the go. So I think it's going to bring a lot more attention to the product, because there may be people who have Netflix who watched wrestling years ago. People in their 40s and 50s, and they might go, "Oh, WWE, I'll stick that on, see what's happening." They'll probably go, "Where's Hulk Hogan?" and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I think it'll bring a lot more attention to the product, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's one last question for you. When do you sleep? You're busy. I mean, that's a schedule. I know you do solo podcasts by and large, so that makes it a little easier. But still, that's a huge time commitment you're putting into your podcast career. Has it been worth it?
I think so. It's always nice to see people. I've got a YouTube channel where I put the videos on the YouTube channel, and people are always commenting on it, going, "Oh, thanks for posting this. It's childhood memories and all this kind of stuff." And you get the odd. I'm not on Twitter anymore because I sort of had enough of that. But before, I was getting an odd notification going, "Oh, your podcast, bringing back some memories," which is all I want to do. I want to let people know my age who may not know anything about old wrestling know it's there, and then also just for people of an older generation to just bring back some memories, because there may be people like you who went to the shows, or there'd be people who knew of the different territories that I do. So it's just fun. I do it after work. Like I said, my wife she works sort of late and early, so when she's on a late, rather than just sit around watching television all night, I just stick some old wrestling on and just talk about it. So it's like I keep saying, as long as I'm enjoying it and other people are listening to it, then that's all that matters, really.
Yep, that's exactly right. The idea is to entertain other people. That's the whole thing in a nutshell. Yeah. Well, listen, you're a fascinating guy, and I'm so happy that you took time out to talk to us here. Tell people where they can find all your stuff.
So everything's on the Place to Be Wrestling Network. It's available on all good podcast suppliers. There is a variety of other podcasts on there. I don't just do podcasts. There is, I think I'm the only British guy now who's doing podcasts on there, but there's a whole range of, they talk about modern stuff, they talk about recent stuff, they talk about old stuff, but there's a whole different range of things out there on the Place to Be Wrestling Network. Like I said, I'm not on social media anymore, sort of through the podcast, so no one can really get hold of me. But if you want to, I'm on Facebook, just search for Luke Jennings, and I'm on there. If there's anything you want to ask me or anything like that. But yeah, Memphis is on every Saturday. Every Monday is Hamburg All Stars. Then every other Monday is Monday Night Project. Every Tuesday is In Your House. And then come November, it'll be Crossing the Mid-Atlantic. And then Pure Wrestling Passion comes out once a month, basically at the beginning of the month. But yeah, if people are listening, thank you. I always say this at the end of my shows, thank you for listening. Until people stop listening, I'll just carry on waffling about wrestling. I discuss what's happening on the screen. I'll have a little laugh and a joke with myself if something happens. If something terrible happens, like a move is botched, I'll kind of point it out, but not in a horrible way, but it's just like, oh my God,
Right.
Which, and it's, it's professional wrestling. It's people, going at full speed, hitting the ropes. The ropes might snap, or someone might fall out of the ring, or someone ducks the clothesline but ends up hitting the elbow. Things, we all know that things happen. But yes, if you do listen, thank you very much, is all I can say, really. I know when I started doing this, I knew that I was a niche in a niche, because wrestling podcasts are a niche, and then obviously covering old school stuff is very, very nichey. And I knew without a big name that I was never going to be a Jim Cornette, or I was never going to be a Bruce Pritchard. I knew my place in life. It's in the bottom of the rung kind of thing.
Yeah, but you know what though? Podcasts build on good conversation, and if you can reach out and touch the listeners with the way you converse, it doesn't matter who you are. Some podcasters are very famous now just for being good at what they do. So it really doesn't matter how famous you are when you start. I think the key to podcasting is consistency. Come out when you say you're going to come out, and then just keep coming out. They will find you. If you're any good, they'll find you. And they're finding you. So congratulations on your success. Please tell the people in the UK, thank you from me, because we have charted in the UK several times. Probably most of the time we're in the chartable podcast charts in the UK. So I appreciate everybody who listens to our show over there. So please give everyone in the UK my regards, and tell them you're on the show. I want people to hear you here.
Yeah, I promote. There's you. There's Our Vantage Point, Acid Wash Memories, Greetings from Allentown, Booking the Territory, Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. I listen to them, so I'm a fan of them. So I like to promote them on the show, as I do you, as I do the WrestleCopia Network. Because if it wasn't for, it started with Jim Cornette. If it wasn't for Jim Cornette, I wouldn't have listened to Booking the Territory. Because they cover, at the minute, they're covering 1993 WCW. There are some they're from New Orleans in Texas. If it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have listened to Our Vantage Point, who are a couple of guys who are up in New Jersey. To me, promoting each other isn't doing anyone harm, because there might be someone listening to me who goes, "Oh, I remember Bob Smith from the magazines."
That's how it works. Familiar. That's how it works.
And you'll promote me, and then go, "Oh, I heard him on the show," or "I've heard his name being scattered around somewhere." So that's how I feel that, it's all good self-promoting, but it also helps promoting others, because you could point someone into their direction and they'll go, "Oh, I'll listen to this." And then, because Our Vantage Point are covering 1987 WWF, like I say, Booking the Territory, they've got a whole Patreon and everything and conglomerate of stuff, but their main show is 1993 WCW, which is, a great time. It's sort of hokey, but it's good. I think they're around about February 93, so they're covering the White Castle of Fear stuff, which is just, dire, but back in the day, you ate it up.
No, it was dire, yeah, gosh.
Yeah. I can remember watching, we used to have WCW Saturday night on in the UK late night. It was on about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, but I think it was never live, it was the week before, and we used to tape it after American Gladiators, and so they're the time period that they're now talking about. I can vaguely remember watching it as like a 7-year-old kid kind of thing. So again, self-promotion is great, but it's also, I think, helps to promote other shows.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't compete with anybody. Who's got the time for that? I mean, you as a podcast realize just doing these shows takes a huge amount of time. So I'd rather put my efforts into just producing the shows, not care about what anybody else does. It's not my scene. I'm not into that, So anyway, I'm glad you have that attitude, and I'm glad you're doing so well. This is Luke Jennings, everybody. What a pleasure to meet you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Bob.
I'm really glad that you came on.
Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully the listeners enjoyed my British tones.
First for this show, I'll tell you that much. So I'm really appreciative of that. All right, everybody, Luke Jennings.
Thank you.
This is where podcast life takes me. I'm in the midst of recording something like 6 shows in 4 days, and I don't know which order I'm going to put them out in. So I can't really tell you anything prescient or anything up to the minute at this point. Although I do want to mention, I want to give my prayers and thoughts to every wrestler who died during August. There were so many, including the Samoans and Sid Vicious and so many others, and Sonny King. Just go down the list. I would be very wrong if I didn't mention those things. Those were the people from my era, and they all hit me really, really hard, especially Sid. I do believe I gave Sid his first national publicity at least in our magazines. And actually, I know that's true. In the GC London magazines, I gave him his first publicity. And I'm proud of that. I picked him out of a lineup, man, in the early days. And I was right. He's one of the great stars of all time. So here's to all the families affected, all the fans affected, and the sport. The sport will never be the same without all these gentlemen. So Sonny King was one of the first wrestlers I ever saw on WWWF. At that time, he was teaming with Chief Jay Strongbow, and they had just defeated Baron Cicluna and King Curtis for the WWWF Tag Team Championships. Those were the days, man. Those were the days. So anyway, I can't really talk about anything prescient because it's not the way this podcast works. We're not a news podcast, It's not up to the minute. 10-10 wins. Give us 20 minutes, we'll give you the whole wrestling world. That's not us. That's other podcasts. We look back on this podcast. But I do want to mention one thing. Something exciting may be happening to and for this podcast in the coming days. It will be announced on this show very soon. It may happen, it may not, but right now I'm in negotiations with someone, and we'll see how things rock and roll. So, I guess that's it for now. Here's our list of advertisements. OutdatedWrestlingHour.buzzsprout.com. We can hear all of our old shows at the click of a button, find out where to hear them, which is virtually anywhere podcasts are heard, and YouTube. So please check that out. And that's where you can find out about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, where for a nominal fee, you can help perpetuate the ongoing adventures of this show and the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Which, by the way, we're working on some really cool stuff. I don't know if you heard the horror movie episode with Joe Puccio, which is really awesome. And right now we are working on an edition where it's the top 100 television series of all time. Seriously. Took forever to put it together with two great guests, Steve Gennarelli and Joe Puccio. So please look for that. Also, if you want to write to us, please write to me if you are a fan at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Do not direct message me at Facebook unless you have business with me, if you'd be so very kind. All right. It's only because Facebook gave me an alert that my box was filling up and I have to be a little more careful with it. I mean, I want to hear from you and I will answer your queries. I promise I will. But in any event, that's at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith in the world that's singing with B.B. King on the banner of his Facebook page. It's fairly easy to find. I do not do a dedicated page for this show. So anyway, things are going well. I hope you enjoyed this edition. My name is Bob Smith. I used to be with Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I'm very proud of that. Oh, and don't miss my occasional scribblings in Sportskeeda with Bill Apter on Bill Apter's column, which is a direct-to-you email column. Find out all about that at the Sportskeeda website. So until next time, yeah, we need some peace and love, man. Right now. Right freaking now.